lights go flashing by. Electric man is in the The other world is on the move, and everybody's got something to do. Somebody out there, has the scene. A man is dead, a 38, waiting to stay. Jewel of light that sets me back on pace. Feel like a visitor from outer space. Please excuse me if I don't quite understand. I'm just a strange electric
Good morning, everybody. It is Thursday, March 29th, and you're riding with me on my morning drive. My name is John. We'll be talking politics for about the next 20 or 30 minutes, so stick with me. Maybe something will interest you. Gosh, where to begin? The boat anchor party is just at it again, between the Trayvon Martin smear campaign and the war on women and the war on Obamacare and, hell, just the war on everybody. I mean, they're just everybody but the rich and the corporations. They're definitely out to get us. But there is something we can do. Got to make sure that you volunteer for a campaign or campaigns, presidential or otherwise. You can email me at mymorningdrive@shredoftruth.com or visit our website, shred, S-H-R-E-D, of O-F, truth, T-R-U-T-H.com. And get in on the conversation. Feel free to comment on any of the stories that are posted there, or go to the message board and sound off. We want to hear your opinions. You can also click on any of the social media buttons that are on there, either Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, Ustream, Technorati, any of those. We're on there as well. We welcome your tweets, welcome your messages. And so it's very important that we all do our civic duty this time around, because this year's elections are, I know it's cliche to say these are the most important elections of our lifetime, but realistically, the way that the Republican Party has shifted, they're now the boat anchor party, extremists, and all they want to do is just basically be dead weight and hold us in place, or even pull us down or backward. It's getting pretty serious, people. We're looking at the possibility that if a Republican president gets elected, that, like, say for instance Mitt Romney were to be elected and you had a Republican controlled House, and even if it was a Democratic controlled Senate and we lost a couple more Senate seats, we could be looking at seriously radical legislation that gets pushed through in that 4 years, or even 8, if that's even humanly possible. I think after they got a dose of 4, I'm sure the country would not be electing a Republican again for quite some time. But then that's probably what we thought after George Bush debacle. So go figure. This country is dumb enough and forgetful enough to just keep voting against their own best interests. It's freaking sad. I'm sorry to say, it's pretty sad. Speaking of sad, Trayvon Martin, that case still continues to roll along. However, last night there was some breaking news on the case, something very, very interesting. In case you haven't seen it or heard about it yet, ABC News broke some video last night of George Zimmerman right after he was taken down to the police station, him getting out of the car and walking around. He was handcuffed, of course, but he was walking around with the police officers walking through there for questioning or whatever, and a couple of interesting tidbits kind of jumped out. One thing was, in the early part of the video there, the one police officer reached his hands into George Zimmerman's pockets in his shirt and his jacket, as if he hadn't searched him before. Just, as a cursory search, just for appearances, which was kind of interesting. And traditionally, you see police officers grabbing, somebody that just shot and killed someone in a violent act like that. They get escorted by police officer or officers in many cases by both arms. They walk them wherever they go. George, he just jumped out of the car. You couldn't see any indication that he had any kind of head injuries or a broken nose. There was no blood on his shirt, and it was a light-colored shirt, so you could see if there was blood on it. None of that. There's nothing to corroborate his story. So there's a lot of eyebrows that were raised from that piece of video, and it just little by little, between that lead investigator saying that he recommended that he be arrested and charged for manslaughter, and the state's attorney's office saying there's not enough evidence to convict, and this video, I'm sorry, George and friends, but I think your days are numbered, buddy. And Joe Oliver is a piece of shit. That guy's an idiot. Freaking black man trying to sit there, and it's almost like Rick Santorum with the blah people thing. So, no, I didn't say black people. I said blah people. It kind of came out. Blah, blah, blah. It's like, are you freaking kidding me? You think we're that stupid? He said effing coon on the freaking 911 tape, Joe. I mean, Nancy Grace was going off on him yesterday or the day before about it, because he's making the rounds of all these different shows. He's taking the media tour, trying to sugarcoat and somehow morph George Zimmerman's reputation back into one that's respectable. I don't understand. I understand you're his friend, Joe, but as a black man specifically, I mean, if I was a black man, regardless if I was his friend, I'd just say, you know what, dude, I can't. At this point, the evidence is awfully incriminating and damning, but you're my friend, so I'm going to withhold judgment until all the facts are in and everything is, all the chips are on the table. But this guy's on a rah tour, and it's rather disgusting. It's almost like he's trying to get a Fox News show, because I mean, what in the hell is possessing Fox and all these morons on the right to want to go on a Trayvon Martin smear campaign? How did this become political? I don't understand that. I don't get how this became political and how this became about character assassination of Trayvon Martin. Don't you think that family's already endured enough heartache? Couldn't you just leave the kid alone and say, you know what, we're not going to speculate, but, we're just going to wait and see all the evidence comes in. At this point, it looks like Trayvon Martin was shot and he was unarmed, but we're not convinced yet. You could say that, and you know what? That wouldn't be so bad. That would at least be, okay, well, somebody has a different viewpoint and they're willing to wait because maybe it's circumstantial or whatever. No, not Fox. They've decided that since all the Democrats and all the people on the left think that this is an injustice, that they are going to disagree, because the sky could be the blue, but they're going to say it's purple, because that's how they are. Anything that Obama or the Democrats or the people on the left or people that don't agree with all of their extremist views, they're painted as terrorists, or they're painted as not like us or something. It's kind of getting old, I mean, seriously, this is really getting old. I mean, what is it exactly that is off limits for them in terms of politicizing it, or taking something and just wanting to sick their disgusting right-wing propaganda machine on it? I don't understand why these people get up in the morning, to be honest with you. I mean, they just get off on this stuff, and that's why I call them the boat anchor party, because in case some of you don't understand an even deeper meaning to the boat anchor party, I've explained it as in, the country is swimming in a vast ocean, and the boat anchor party is basically wrapped around our ankles, keeping us in place, as any good boat anchor would. keeps the boat from moving, keeps it from going anywhere, forward, backward. Well, we're allowed to go backward, we're just not allowed to go forward. So it's a special kind of boat anchor. But even more than that, anybody that's into cars, there's like back in the 70s, there were several Cadillac, big displacement Cadillac motors, like the 472 and some other ones. And other motors besides that, like the 305's been grouped in that category as well, that they call boat anchors because they're worthless motors. I mean, they're deemed in cars in high performance circles as worthless. They're obviously not worthless because they run cars and some of them are even reliable. They're just not, excuse me, for what they are, they're just not fast. They're not out of the factory. They're not a hypo motor. They're not a motor that really, you know, screams like, say, a vet motor out of the factory, or something. They're for their displacement, they're pretty low horsepower, and thus they would call them boat anchors. So worthless motors were deemed boat anchors, and of course, worthless politicians. Many of them are boat anchors. I'll call them boat anchors because that's what they are, and that's what they deserve to be called. Boat anchors you could consider to be worthless hunks of metal. Well, I consider GOP politicians these days worthless hunks of shit. So that's my take on the whole boat anchor thing, and that's why you'll hear me call them the boat anchor party. And from time to time, I'll revisit this explanation just so that everyone knows that I'm not losing my mind, calling or wondering what the heck's he talking about, boat anchor party. But I'm going to stick with that for now because I think it's something. I think it's I think it's fitting, and I think it's deserved. I mean, these guys get away with way too much. They get way too much media coverage. Their voice is still part of the conversation, even though their failed policies have gotten us into some of the biggest messes imaginable. They're still around. They're still allowed to chime in. They're still, an equal part of the conversation, even though they're complete idiot assholes that don't really have the best interest of the country in mind. I mean, it's obvious if they did, they wouldn't be doing this stuff. They would be trying to figure out ways to come up with solutions to actually help the greatest number of people, put the greatest number of people back to work, and keeping people healthy. I mean, that's just the bottom line. And the whole Trayvon Martin case is just one more sad example of not only an injustice where an unarmed boy was shot and killed in his youth unnecessarily, but now you've got the Fox News right-wing propaganda machine piling on. I mean, these people are they're just disgusting. I'm sorry, there's no other way to put it. I mean, how disgusting can you allow yourself to be before somebody removes you from your position or puts you in your place? I just don't understand. And I mean, thankfully Democrats are starting, Democrats and independents are really starting to wake up and they're starting to hit back, but I mean, it's got to be really forceful. These guys don't play, and they've got millions or even really billions of dollars behind them to influence these elections and to get their way, which is for rich people to have more freaking big tax cuts. And we know we need that so desperately, right? I mean, that's the thing that's so maddening about it is how we absolutely don't need that, but we're going to get it anyway. Because that's the path to prosperity. Even though that path has been open for the last 10 or 15 years or 20 years or whatever the heck it's been, and it hasn't worked. It's been the road to ruin. And that's what I'll always call the Paul Ryan budget, is road to ruin, because that's what it is. But the other topics that we need to talk about are, I mean, obviously the war on women rages on. I mean, we've got legislators wanting to pass legislation in Arizona that women have to watch another woman's abortion procedure before she can have one. Next thing they're going to be doing is saying that a woman has to eat another woman's fetus, aborted fetus, in order to have almost like an initiation or a rite of passage or something in order to have an abortion. Or they're going to have a woman's going to have a hot brand sear of scarlet letter into her forehead before she can have an abortion. I mean, we're getting back to the days of the Puritans and the Quakers, when things were still religiously oppressive, back to the Salem witch trials, I mean, that's what we're getting back to. We're almost to that point where it seems like some of these people have gotten such a head full of bad medicine that they're just, I don't know what they're thinking. I mean, it's all Bible all the time, and it's their twisted version of of what they think the Bible stands for, which I can't for the life of me figure out what Bible they're reading that tells them these things, to do these things. But hey, it's a free country, to each their own. They're allowed to have that opinion. They're allowed to do that, but they're not allowed, according to the Constitution anyway, they're not allowed to force that shit on us. This religion, injecting your religion into our government and by extension our lives is really getting old. And it's really something that our founding fathers would have abhorred. They did abhor it. That's why they went to great lengths to keep church and state separate. Duh. And of course, speaking of church and state, Supreme Court, no, they're not trying to inject any religion, but they are trying to inject their own radical right-wing views into the Obamacare case here. I mean, they're obviously going, it looks to me like they're going down the path, despite the White House saying they're confident they're going to uphold it and this and that. I mean, a lot of people are thinking this game over. Because the questioning was pretty bad. Their typical conservative questioning, just like you hear these idiots in the media. Talking about, it's just, it blows me away. I don't understand how people are going to try to equate, mandating health care with having to buy a cell phone or broccoli, because it's a ridiculous argument. It's a completely different argument. I mean, cell phones and broccoli, if people don't buy them, it doesn't cost everybody else more money to buy cell phones and broccoli. So that's one thing right there, because of brilliant old Ronald Reagan passing that ordinance back in the 80s. I think it was 1986 that he helped pass the legislation to that requires hospital to treat anyone, regardless of whether they have insurance or not, which is great, in theory. I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that we should be turning people away and to die, but when people don't have insurance and they go to a hospital or emergency room for their health care, that costs us all, a lot more money, because somebody's got to eat that cost, which in an emergency room or in that scenario, or if they're already sick, and instead of getting preventive care, costs a ton more money, either because it's a more serious illness and that costs more money to treat, or because the costs of healthcare at an emergency room are a lot more expensive than in a doctor's office. Thus, that gets eaten by the hospital, who then passes it on to their insurance, and then that gets passed on to us in the form of higher premiums. So, I'm just a little bit annoyed with these people that don't want to recognize this fact. It's rather disgusting. But, that's just the way things are. I mean, I don't know what it's going to take for people to wake up. I mean, I think what's going to happen is, if the Supreme Court does overturn Obamacare, I think you're really going to see a push for either Medicare for all or something like that. So, I mean, honestly, regardless of which way this goes, I think things are actually going to turn out great regardless. So, it may not be all gloom and doom. I mean, for some people, it's going to be gloom and doom, because they're already, some people, their children, the children's part of it, as far as can't be denied for pre-existing conditions, already kicked in. And there's a lot of children who've gotten health care who weren't able to get it before, who had pre-existing conditions, that now, if Obamacare is overturned, they won't be able to get it. There's people that are, a lot of older people, I think, in Medicare, and I'm not sure what else. I probably need to look into those specifics, but I know there are a lot of people that are able to take care of or take advantage under Obamacare of preventive care for free. And then, of course, the Medicare donut holes closed up. I mean, seniors are not going to be a happy camper about that coming back. I mean, Republicans are going to own this too at that point. They're going to be the ones that overturned Obamacare, and only a third of the country want to see it overturned. So good luck come election time, guys, because you're in the vast minority. A third is not the majority. It's not nowhere near the majority. In case you didn't know that, because the other 2/3 of the country don't want to overturn it. So real smart there, guys. I'm just not sure exactly what they're thinking, but so there certainly is no thinking involved, I don't believe. But, that's just the way it goes, because the Republicans, the boat anchor party, doesn't seem like they think about much except for feathering their own nest or those of their campaign contributors, because that's kind of the common theme here. I mean, you look at, like, James Inhofe, for example. He's such an anti-global warming guy. You know, you have to kill his ass before he'll admit that there's a global warming. Yet his campaign contributors are the Koch brothers and other oil companies and energy companies and all these people that have an absolute vested interest in there not being man-made climate change or global warming. So of course he's a whore. He's a freaking oil whore. Plain and simple. I mean, there's no other way to explain it. And these people that want to sugarcoat this into something else, he's a corporate whore. I don't know what the hell else you have to know about the guy in order for that to be apparent. He's just one example. I mean, there's more. And of course, we've got all these things going on right now, and we can't get any kind of jobs legislation passed. The transportation bill is being held up by the dipsticks in the House. The boat anchor party strikes again. There's about 40 or 50 real boat anchors in the House that are, the teabagger nimrods that just came in there to basically try to throw monkey wrenches in the government gears and try to grind everything to a halt, not get anything done, so that it reflects poorly upon the president, so that he has as little as possible to be able to run on in the election. Which means, of course, that unless it makes them look good, or it makes them look horribly bad for not doing something, that they're not going to do anything. So, I mean, this mentality of these people, I really wish that more people would pay attention to what's going on with these Republicans and how they're acting, because, I mean, I don't for the life of me understand how you could vote for somebody that wants to get into Washington basically just to disrupt everything. I think there's already enough gridlock in Washington. There's already enough, dysfunction. Why in the hell would you want to add to that? And why would anybody want to elect someone who wants to add to that? The reason why is because of hatred and political ideology. It's just like this whole Trayvon Martin thing. I mean, you got a lot of racists that are watching Fox News, and all they're doing with smearing this kid is basically just feeding that racism base and getting them more and more bunged up, so that the Obama derangement syndrome rages on, and maybe even attracts more people. I think we've kind of reached the crescendo of the Obama derangement syndrome base. I think that you've probably got about a third of the country that just despises Obama for whatever, probably just because of what Fox News and conservative media has filled their head full of, because most of what he's done they don't disagree with. Like giving tax cuts to the middle class, which he's done, they don't disagree with that. They disagree with the stimulus only because they've been brainwashed into thinking it's a bad thing. It actually did help. It did help quite a bit. Obamacare, They're brainwashed into thinking that's a bad thing when it's not. It's going to lower the deficit. It's only helping people. The benefits have already started being realized. I mean, we're at a fundamental point right now where people really need to pay attention to what these politicians are doing and why it is that they're doing what they're doing. Is it based on pure political ideology and a hatred for Obama for irrational reasons, for no real reason, not because you even agree with his policies that horribly, just that vehemently, but just the fact that he's a black man, or even not that, but just that you think he's all these things because somebody has said so. Like Sarah Palin in Game Change. If you haven't seen that movie yet, that's a good example of how she's like a perfect poster child for Fox News misinformation. She thought Saddam Hussein had something to do with 9/11. She thought all the cliche misinformation things that you hear coming out of so many Fox News watchers' mouths, or from so many idiotic right-wingers' mouths, she was it. She was a walking embodiment of that. And as long as you have that kind of person running around who, is so passionate about being wrong, it's just a snowball effect. Hopefully we can stop the growth of that cancer and at least contain it and keep it at a certain number so that it doesn't affect this upcoming election, because it is so important that we get Obama reelected. Not because he himself is the best president we've ever had. That's nothing of the sort. He's got his issues and they're well known. But only because of what the alternative means. You think back to when FDR got elected. If we would have elected another Republican after Herbert Hoover, what do you think our country would have been? I don't really think we would have won World War II, and I don't really think that we would have been plunged deeper into a Great Depression, and we would have stayed there a lot longer. That's just the way it is. I mean, we don't have any FDRs right now, and that's part of the problem. I mean, FDR was an amazing president, and that's the kind of president we need again. But for the time being, we're just going to have to make do with Obama, because Mitt Romney and Rick Santorum are certainly not the answer. But the answer lies within us, because we've got to make sure that we not only re-elect President Obama, but that we give him a Congress that will push him to a progressive agenda. A Congress that will say, you know what, we want Medicare for all, and they'll introduce it, and they'll all pass it, and the House and the Senate will send a Medicare for all bill to the president's desk. Imagine that. That's what we're talking about. All the things that we need as a country going forward to put us in the best position to succeed in every way possible, to soar to the highest heights that we can. We've got to have, even if it's not an absolute progressive Congress, it's got to be a reliable Democratic Congress. And what I mean by that is it's got to have a House majority. Again, I don't care if it's Nancy Pelosi or whoever. I mean, honestly, a new Speaker of the House on with the Democrats wouldn't be a bad thing, even though Nancy Pelosi is a pretty decent Speaker of the House. She did get quite a few things done, but a fresh face and some new blood might not be a bad idea as Speaker. And I'm sure we can find somebody. And we need at least a 60, preferably a 60 to 61 or 62 vote reliable Democratic majority. Meaning, we don't want to have to rely on Mary Landrieu or what's his name in West Virginia? I can't remember his name now. Joe Manchin, I think it is. We can't afford to have these blue dogs be the swing vote on some of this legislation, because if they are, there's going to be backroom deals and sweetheart or sweeteners and people throwing people bones, and we can't have that. That's part of the problem with the way things are running nowadays, is people are disgusted with all that. And so we've got to have a majority that isn't emboldened to oil companies or this or that. Granted, all these politicians have somebody that they owe. I understand that. And as long as, until we get a Congress that's going to reform lobbying and campaign finance, that's going to continue. And that's the other thing is, we need as progressive of a Congress as possible so that we can have the chance to introduce that legislation. Because there's definitely a good chance you get a Democratic Congress like I'm talking about, the kind that I'm describing, and you've got a very good chance of at least getting something done with that. And more than likely, your chances are actually pretty good. More than 50-50, certainly. A lot, probably more like 60-40, 70-30. But if you maintain the current makeup where you barely have a Democratic majority, a shaky Democratic majority in the Senate, and a majority in the House of Republicans, and you get a Republican president, you can kiss doing any of that stuff goodbye. You're not going to get any of that stuff done. You can hang it up. So if you want to see that stuff done, if you want to see Washington improve, and you want to see government work better, work more efficiently, and work for you, instead of, doing things that nobody really gives two shits about, like giving tax cuts to corporations and the wealthy, then you better get your butt out there, quit sitting on the sideline, help with campaigns, help do your part, and make sure you vote, and make sure that you're qualified to vote. With all this voter suppression law, you've got to get out there, make sure you've got a photo ID. Alrighty, well, I got to get going. It's been great talking to you on a Thursday, March 29th. My name is John, and you've been with me on my morning drive. I'm out of here.